All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the October 19th, 2022 Grants Pass City Council meeting. And we start our meetings off with a moment of silence, so please join me for that. Please rise for the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have a full house tonight with all council members present, so that's nice. We are going to start off with a proclamation for domestic violence awareness. Whereas domestic violence is a serious and pervasive crime affecting millions of women, men, and children and communities in the United States every year. Whereas 1 in 3 women will experience domestic violence in her lifetime, 1 in every 4 women will experience sexual assault in her lifetime, and 1 in 6 men have had abusive or unwanted sexual experiences in their lifetime. Whereas approximately 15.5 million children are exposed to domestic violence every year. Whereas when a family member is abused, it can have long-term damaging effects on the victim that also leave a mark on family, friends, and the community at large. Whereas the problems of sexual and domestic violence are not confined to any group or groups of people, but crosses all economic, racial, gender, educational, religious, and societal barriers, and are sustained by societal indifference. Whereas victims should have help to find the compassion, comfort, and healing they need, and abusers should be punished to the full extent of the law. Whereas victims of violence should have access to medical and legal services, counseling, emergency and transitional housing, and other support services so that they can safely escape the cycle of abuse. Whereas we encourage domestic and sexual violence victims and their families to seek assistance from appropriate victim services organizations, such as the Women's Crisis Support Team. Whereas it is important to recognize the compassion and dedication of the individuals who provide services to victims of domestic and sexual violence and work to increase public understanding of this significant problem. Whereas local programs, state coalitions, national organizations, and other agencies nationwide are committed to increasing public awareness of domestic and sexual violence and its prevalence, and to eliminating it through prevention and education. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Sarah Bristol, Mayor of the City of Grants Pass, proclaim October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, honoring domestic violence survivors and advocates. And do we have someone here from the Women's Crisis Support Team? Thank you. And did you want to say a few words? Yeah. Okay, go ahead and take the mic there and make sure that the mic is on. No, just make sure the light is on at the base.
There we go. Do I hold it? There we go.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Kobe Gibson. I have been working as an intervention, shelter, and most recently prevention and outreach advocate with WCST since the beginning of the year. Thank you for proclaiming October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It is an honor to represent my agency in the work that we do here today. This year alone, WCST has received over 1,000 crisis line calls, provided in-person advocacy services, resources, referrals to more than 730 unduplicated individuals, and provided 2,900 shelter nights to survivors and their families. This month is an important tribute to victims and survivors of domestic violence. It harms individuals in far too many ways and deeply affects communities. Yet this conversation is not always welcomed, and many survivors are expected to heal on their own in privacy away from the public's eye. Is this because we don't care? Of course not. As humanity, it is beyond difficult to watch another human being suffer, and often the battle can feel hopeless. Community is not only a crucial part to a survivor's safety and healing, it also plays a key role in the prevention of future violence. Join WCST's fight to end violence by recognizing domestic violence as a critical public health problem, standing to support survivors by letting them know they are believed and not alone, speaking in ways that promote justice and equality that includes interrupting sexist language, jokes, and media, using language that holds abusers accountable first and foremost without victim blaming, and promoting awareness and prevention of domestic and sexual violence in social settings. Finally, acting to advocate for early education on the dynamics of power and control within relationships. If we do our part to stop victim blaming when we hear it, work together to promote social change, and empower survivors when they report, we can and will work towards ending domestic and sexual violence in our community. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for being here, and thanks for the work that you do. And Chief, I'm going to hand it over to you. I heard there's a presentation you're going to make.
I believe there's a presentation, and we have Scott Hayes on the line. He's going to do a short presentation and explain why the Grants Pass Police Department recently received state accreditation. So I'll turn it over to Karen and bring up Scott.
Hi, just checking, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Oh, super. Good evening, Madam Mayor, councilors, and members of the community. My name is Scott Hayes, and I'm the Executive Director for the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. I appreciate the opportunity today to address City Council and present the Grants Pass Police Department with its first award of accreditation under the leadership of Chief Warren Hensman. A little background as to who the Oregon Accreditation Alliance is and why we exist. Law enforcement is experiencing a changing society with increased demands for police accountability and transparency. As in the past, our profession must face these challenges and work with our communities to address these concerns. Accreditation is one step towards building community trust and the legitimacy of our profession. The Oregon Accreditation Alliance was formed under the direction of the Oregon Chiefs of Police Association, the Oregon State Sheriff's Association, and the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials. We provide accreditation services for 85 law enforcement agency and communication centers in the state of Oregon and several in Alaska. Accreditation goals are pretty straightforward. We are here to support the continued improvement of law enforcement services, to establish best practice through professional standards, to establish agency accountability and transparency, and to enhance the management of police operations. This is a monumental step for any agency to be evaluated by an outside independent organization and have its policies and practices scrutinized. There are 106 law enforcement standards the agency must adhere to. These standards are based on best practice, both nationally and through Oregon law. In addition to each standard, the agency must also show proof of compliance that the agency follows policy and best practice. Once an agency is accredited, the Oregon Accreditation Alliance conducts a reassessment of the agency every 3 years to ensure continued compliance. I'd like to point out that I know that a number of staff members were involved in the entire process. I'd like to recognize Lieutenant Jeff Hattersley as the accreditation manager for the department. He worked very closely with our assessors and myself through the process and did a phenomenal job of preparing the agency for the review. I'd also like to note that the Grants Pass 911 Communication Center is also a member of Oregon Accreditation Alliance and is working its way towards the accreditation process and soon to receive their first award of accreditation. Chief, On behalf of the Oregon Accreditation Alliance and its Board of Directors, I'd like to present you with your first award of accreditation. And it's my understanding you have the plaque there, and hopefully you brought it to City Council.
I did, and you probably can't see me, but if I could take a moment and ask Lieutenant Hattersley to please step forward. Jeff has done a tremendous amount of work, and here in Grants Pass, we do not have the luxury to hire an accreditation manager. So Jeff is our CID lieutenant, so he oversees all of the most violent investigations in our city. He's an incredibly busy man, and this would be his side job, essentially. This is a tough job because there are, as Scott said, there's many standards to adhere to. But on top of that, I want to share with the council and my colleagues in the community that we don't take this certification, this award, lightly. We believe that we are going to be promoting best practice standards for other organizations to emulate nationwide. So I would like to present this to Jeff and just thank Jeff and all the men and women for doing an incredible amount of work day in, day out. And I'm just so proud of this organization.
Thanks for being with us tonight, Scott, and thanks to both the Chief and Lieutenant Hattersley for the work you do on behalf of the department. We know that we have a great department here in Grants Pass, and it's good to get the recognition that you all deserve. Makes us proud to be part of the same team. All right. Public hearing. All right, moving on to our public hearing. At this time, I will open the public hearing to consider an application filed by Road Community College to amend the zoning map, annexing properties located at 360627A0, tax lots 1000, 1001, and on 360627AD, tax lots 900, 1000, 1400, 1600, and at 360627D0, tax lot 101. That was fun. We will begin the hearing with a staff report, followed by a presentation by the applicant, statements by persons in favor of the application, statements by persons in opposition to the application, and an opportunity for additional comments by the applicant and staff. After that has occurred, the public comment portion will be closed and the matter will be discussed and acted upon by the council. Is there anyone present who wishes to challenge the authority of the council to hear this matter? Do any councilors wish to abstain from participating in this hearing or declare a potential conflict of interest? I'm going to note that I do work for Road Community College, but I am not going to be participating in the discussion or voting tonight, so I'll just merely be the facilitator. Are there any counselors who wish to disclose discussions, contacts, or other ex parte information they have received prior to this meeting regarding the application? In this hearing, the decision of the council will be based upon specific criteria which are set forth in the Development Code. All testimony which apply in this case are noted in the staff report. If you would like a copy of the report, please write that on a note to the city manager and one will be provided. It's important to remember if you fail to raise an issue with enough detail to afford the council and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The hearing will now proceed with a report from staff.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. I'm Bradley Clark, Director of the Community Development Department. We have Jason Mackey's name up here. He is the Associate Planner who was assigned to this application and spent most of the time preparing the materials that are in your packet tonight. The basic summary, as you stated, Mayor, there's really two items that you're talking about tonight. One is annexation, and the second is a rezone. Typically, when you annex property, you you put a zone on it at the same time. In this case, they actually currently have a city zone, but they're proposing to change that city zone kind of in a companion step with the annexation. So those are the two ones before you. The zone map change is from an R42 to an R41. There was a public hearing by the Planning Commission July 17th, and the findings of fact signed August 11th. And then the relationship to your council goals is identified there. It's really to allow expanded development at the Redwood campus. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the area. It's at the extreme west end of the urban growth boundary, with the Redwood Highway on the north boundary, and then Desmarais Drive providing an access to the campus through College Drive on the south side there. There is some existing development in the city to the east, and to the west is unincorporated Josephine County. So as I mentioned, there was a public hearing before the Planning Commission. Their authority is primarily with the zone map amendment. The Development Code does not give the Planning Commission direct authority to make formal recommendations on annexations. Those are really your purview as a council. But they did review the material. It was all submitted kind of at the same time, and so you do have a recommendation from both. On the zone map amendment, the comprehensive plan designation is high-density residential. It allows for those three different zones, R41, R42, and R5. So since the zone map amendment does not change that comp plan, there's not a comprehensive plan change involved tonight. The thing that's driving the zone change is the land use. Under our development code, the current zoning of R42 prohibits schools. That was put on well after, that zone was, put on well after they were, the schools, the campus was there. So it just sort of became a grandfathered issue. But now with the zone change, there's a chance to really align the use with the appropriate zone. So schools are allowed as a primary use in the R41. So that's really the main on the zone map amendment. For the annexation, there's a couple of points here that we should talk about. There's an intergovernmental agreement that the city has had with Josephine County since the late 80s. And that IGA really regulates how development in the urban growth boundary happens between Josephine County and the city. There is 2 tiers of development types that are in that IGA. One tier is sort of your single-family house, doing just any basic home occupation or other kinds of permits. That is tier 1. Tier 2 is really everything else. So if you want to do anything significant on a property and you're in the urban growth boundary, you kind of kick into that tier 2. Under that tier, RCC has basically exhausted its development capacity, meaning they really only have about 3,000 square feet more left of development potential under that tier 1. So they've added about 19,000 square feet of building area since the calculations were done in 2018. Most of the change has happened through their new science building, which was opened up, I think, just last year. That's about 17,500 square feet. So basically, the campus is at a point where if they want to do anything, more than 3,000 square foot of new development on the campus, they're capped under this IGA, so they would need to annex. If the annexation is approved, there is no cap, that becomes null and void. So just a few site details, and we do have representatives tonight here that will give you more, I'm sure. But the total site is 87 acres, about 87 acres, and there are 7 tax lots that the district, the RCC district owns. Those are listed there. The mayor read those earlier. And the current base zoning R42 and the proposed zoning R41. Here's the layout of the campus today. And the surrounding land uses, I touched on those a little bit earlier, but basically you have the Redwood Highway to the north. The south, you get rural residential, some single-family homes. To the east, also single-family homes. There's a duplex project and some vacant land. And then to the west is rural residential, county zoning, and single-family homes. As far as what's there for city utilities, public utilities, there's private laterals that are served by an off-site private pump station. It's just off the edge of the map here on the north side here, and if you've driven by down Highway 199, you probably saw it put up about a year and a half ago. It's under a covered area. It's got very sizable pipes. I think there's 16-inch, 18-inch pipes. So that is a private pump station. Those are private lines that serve the campus, but it's public water, city water. Sewer, there's a 10-inch main that serves the property, actually I think also an 8-inch one, and then there's several private sewer laterals. So upon annexation, the private ones would remain private unless some other negotiation happened in the future. There is today no direct connection to the city's storms water system. And then in terms of vehicular access, you have the ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation right-of-way, you have State Highway and College Drive. And then you do have the College Drive that enters from Desmarais. That is a Josephine County owned road that is privately maintained. So it's got a really funky jurisdiction there on that. We are not proposing that to be part of the annexation. So the city would not take in that road. Today, it's not built to our city standards. It's possible that it could be annexed and that we could take it in the future, but that's only if it's brought up to city specs. So moving on to some of the criteria for approval. We'll talk first about the zone map amendment and then the annexation. So there are 7 criteria that if you're going to change your zoning according to the city's code, you got to meet. The Planning Commission found that they met all those. We did want to highlight tonight for the council number 1 and number 4 in particular. So criterion 1 says that the proposed use, if any, is consistent with the proposed zoning district. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. Schools is prohibited under the today's zone, but it's allowed under the R41. So the Planning Commission found that was satisfied. Criterion 4 says a demonstration that the proposed amendment is consistent with the functions, capacities, and performance standards of transportation facilities identified in the Master Transportation Plan. At this point, the recommendation from the Planning Commission is that that's satisfied, primarily because RCC is expected to continue to occupy and be the primary use on the property. So, in terms of traffic generation, what's there today would be there tomorrow, whether it's annexed or not. If it isn't, in either scenario, whether it's annexed or not, they're going to have to comply with the city's transportation impact analysis and do other studies. So the commission found that really didn't change much, and so they recommended that one be satisfied. So those were the 2 on the zone map amendment. For the annexation, these are approved. There's 6 criteria that you have to find as council before you can authorize annexation. Those are some similar ones to the zone map amendment. The main one that we wanted to highlight is criterion 6. So criterion 6, and this is in Article 5 of the Development Code, says that the City of Grants Pass has sufficient capacity to provide the property with basic urban services, such as municipal water, sanitary sewer, fire protection, and police protection. So there's a lot there that needs to be looked at, and the staff report and the Planning Commission, using the applicant's information, using some research from our staff, delved into the main services that the city provides. So we wanted to highlight this because this is an important one for you tonight. So on the sanitary sewer, the campus is part of the existing Grants Pass sewer service area. There is a 10-inch gravity main, an 8-inch polyvinyl gravity main. No development is proposed as part of this application. Those are expected to be able to continue to serve the property. Municipal water, the campus is connected to our water system, as I mentioned, through that pump station. And that pump station and the size of the lines that serve the campus are expected to be able to meet the future demands of the campus. Storm drainage. The campus is sized with enough open space there today that would be expected so that, you know, if any new structures come into play in the future, there should be adequate space to be able to design stormwater ponds, whether that be surface or subsurface, and to detain the future stormwater. Fire protection. The RCC contracts with Rural Metro today, and then the City of Grants Pass Fire Rescue Division serves as backup. So if annexed, that would be reversed, where the city fire would be the primary and Rural Metro would be backup. Our fire department staff did review this. They didn't have any concerns with the annexation. And then finally, police protection. RCC maintains a contract with a private security firm that provides security officers at the campus. That is to propose to be continued, that security. They are reachable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they plan to continue that contract. Chief Hensman did submit some further comments, and I wanted to highlight a few of those. Those are in your packet as well. So the police department, they met with Redwood campus staff on site and they did a tour, and they addressed a number of different topics. Police expectations, historical calls for service from the county sheriff, what's called a Clery Act reporting, which is what all higher education have to prepare and produce. So there's a Clery Act report that they reviewed. The police department's comments go on to say, if annexed, all of the Grants Pass Police Department non-priority calls for service to the campus will be prioritized by available resources, and the response times are expected to be longer than current non-priority response times. The addition of the campus into our service area increases the geographic footprint. It increases the citizen population with the students there. They do not house students currently on the campus, so it is limited there to that daytime, and there are gates, as you probably know, that are closed at night, and that 24-hour security that I mentioned does monitor those gates, but they are closed at night and open back up in the morning. RCC staff indicated a willingness to direct students and faculty to the police department's online reporting platform for property and nonviolent crimes when appropriate. Priority emergency calls for service to the campus are expected to fall within the current emergent response times. So the overall assessment of the police department here is that they're equipped to manage priority emergency calls for service. Non-priority calls will be prioritized and available resources extended out. They do share the concern. They shared this with the RCC staff and asked that they direct those appropriate and eligible incidents to the online reporting portal. And as you know, having gone through the police review a couple of years ago with the budget, they're already stretched pretty thin and are working through staffing shortages now. But after their review, they do believe that they can manage the addition of the campus through the items listed there. So it would put a greater burden on an already strained police department, but the bottom line from them right now is that it would be manageable. So that is the two applications that are before you, and as I mentioned, the Planning Commission did recommend approval. and you have that there. So that's staff's part of the presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Brad? DJ?
Looks like you've checked all the boxes here. I do have a question about the private pump station. I understand that that's not a very common occurrence to have a private pumping station servicing annexed property. Is that fair to presume?
I can't think of one in the city, but there are there are many houses that have private pumps that serve them.
Sure. So I guess the question would be, I have two questions about it. For service, is it the intent for that pump station to exclusively service RCC, or is there an intent for that pump station to service beyond that?
So that station was designed exclusively for RCC. It doesn't meet the city's standards, although they did try to get it close. It would remain a private station to serve the college campus.
Okay, and then the second question would be maintenance or replacement. Is there any expectation for the city to be involved in any maintenance or replacement of that pump station in the future?
That conversation has not been had. It is a college facility, so it would be on to them to replace that in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, so Jason, so if they're annexed, obviously our police and fire are equipped to handle that situation. There's no additional funding. RCC would not be paying the safety levy. That's correct, right?
Well, they would pay just as any other city annexed property in terms of the funding. Is that, unless maybe you
With their
wanna-
nonprofit status, they would be exempt from the majority of property taxes unless they were subleasing certain pieces within their footprint, and maybe they had a commercial business there. There would be some small tax revenue coming to the city.
So, okay, so essentially, as it stands now, they wouldn't be paying anything to public safety, near as I can tell. But I guess the next question that follows that, right now there's no housing, there's no student housing there. I'm a little concerned. I know it wasn't long ago, just a few months ago, in an area of Eugene that had very high student concentration, residential area with a lot of students. There was essentially a riot, and the police were completely overwhelmed. Now that's obviously a bigger area, but my point is if they were to, or my question is, I guess, if RCC were to ever have housing for students, is the city allowed to make it a requirement that they continue to have their own police presence, their own campus police presence, or would our police department be expected to police the student housing as well with no contribution to the levy? So would we be able to make it a condition of student housing that they have their own police department and they're able to handle that?
So if it's annexed, any new development applications would go through a site plan review process. That's subject to Article 19. Site plan reviews are outlined in Article 9. There's a series of criterion, just like you're talking about tonight, that have to be met with any future site plan review. One of those criterion does, deal with the impacts on services. Now, whether you can condition a new building related to police, I would have to, check with the attorney on that. I think there's some gray area there in terms of what you can actually put as a new condition of approval when they're already zoned and they're already in the city. They do have to meet those criterion in the future, but for the most part, any new uses now, we are going to be obligated as a city to provide those services.
Are there any other questions? Valerie?
Yeah, that kind of goes along with that, but I know that's not what we were really talking about in terms of putting housing out there eventually, but will they need to do like a traffic impact analysis if they do any other development on that property that brings in more? Just,
If they meet the trigger in our code, which is, a certain number of trips, I think it's 25 per peak hour. So if that new building is projected to increase traffic by, 25 trips at a peak hour, then yes, they would have to do a new separate traffic impact analysis. That maybe doesn't sound like much, but it's quite a bit. It's, for example, the 17,500 square foot science center did not trigger it.
Okay.
But, again, we're using numbers about staff, students, how many seats are in there, how many classrooms are in there. Those are the kinds of things that would trigger that. So I guess to get to your point, Counselor, it really depends on what the new use is. I mean, if they put in a new football field or something, that's pretty different than just adding a 5,000 square foot lab.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Is the applicant here to come forward and make a presentation?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, my name is Jay Harlan with CSA Planning with offices at 4497 Brown Ridge. We're the agent of record for Road Community College in this matter. And also here this evening is the newly minted president of Road Community College, Randy Weber, and also Lisa Stanton, who is the vice president of operations and finance. And this sort of thing falls under her department at the college. Your planning director did an excellent job. I'm not going to go through revisit all those details. That's a good report that, really hits the highlights of what's going on. And so I'll kind of, forego reviewing a bunch of things that was just presented and is also in the materials. But I do want to speak to a few of the questions. And first, specifically as it relates to housing, the college has a master plan. That's kind of how colleges, campuses, in the case of RCC, they have multiple locations, right? So they have one master plan that's for the whole entire college, right? And then that's made up of smaller plans for the specific areas. The master plan for the current master plan, which is, I think they did, and I want to say 3 years ago, right? And it's a 10-year plan. Doesn't plan for any housing. And that kind of feeds into the next response to those sort of line of questions, is that the college, that's actually kind of what the next step that they've talked about doing, and they can't do it until we're done with this proceeding, but I can just tell you the conversations within operations and finance have been to go forward. The next step would be to actually bring the master plan through to the city and have the city approve the master plan through a process, rather than doing kind of one building and one building and one building. If you look at the master plan, there's a lot of benefits to that. Then things like transportation impacts and stuff like that get looked at holistically. And you may have to do a little bit more analysis, but you also have a better picture of what's going on. And when you're especially a public entity like the college, and you're trying to get grants and you're competing for money at the state level, one of the things you want to represent is, if you give us the money, the project is going to be approved, and we already have a location for it, and those kinds of things. And so that's kind of the vision that that I think that has been talked about within the management. And again, if you want to ask Ms. Stanton or the president, I'm sure he's happy to answer those questions. But I think that's the direction. But it really is predicated on the annexation that's before you this evening, so that can be a good use of funds, right? To go through that, to be hiring traffic engineers and looking at those kinds of things just doesn't make sense if you don't know that, in fact, you would be allowed to add another 8,000 square foot this or 9,000 square foot that. So that's, that's kind of where they're at in their facility planning. I do think, I appreciate everything that that the police chief said, and I think I was in the first meeting and I wasn't there for the walkthrough. but it sounds like it was a good conversation. I understand 100%. I mean, we deal with our firm deals with lots of municipalities, and lots of the police forces are strapped and are being asked to do a lot. So I do get that. But I do think also the college as an entity is an entity that is training people to help people get jobs and do things that are productive, and overall, in the longer term, that's is going to be a benefit to maybe not needing to have so much demand on the police services. So I think education is one of the ways that can contribute to that. So with that, I don't have a lot of additional initial comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the council has.
Are there any questions? No questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this application?
Good evening, Madam Mayor and fellow council members. I'm up here really with carrying two hats.
Pat, can you stop and tell us your name?
Okay, Pat Fahey, 3944 Redwood Highway, Grants Pass. The two hats I wear is I'm on the board of directors of the governance body for Road Community College. I'm also a resident. I've thought about today on the way over here, I'm probably one of the longest living residents in the Redwood area. And I hate to say that because I don't feel that old, but I guess I am. I've lived there my whole life. I want to remind everybody what Road Community College is. It's the primary career training center for Josephine County and Jackson County. When I was first appointed on the board a long time ago, my job was to protect the interests of Josephine County on that board that is now in Jackson County. And I categorize my job up here today as to do that. Because right now, you've heard the staff recommendation, right now without annexation, we're kind of stymied for any kind of growth we want to do. So when we want to expand the career training things we do for people, nurses training, plumbers, electricians, those kind of things, we're stymied. We can't go forward. So I want you to consider that. And on the other hand, I'd like to talk about being a resident. I grew up in a house that was literally in the shadow of the drive-in theater that is no longer there. I've lived there long before the city was there. I've watched the city grow out in that area to meet the needs of the community. As population grew, housing became short, we grew out in the Redwood area. My memory of that is hayfields and dairy yards. And I think when I look at this, in this annexation, it's really one more step by the city of Grants Pass to respond to the needs of the community. We need the career training, we need those professionals, and this is how we get it done. And I think this is a positive step to make that happen. And I'm just hoping that you look beyond the points that were brought up here today about we're adding services that have to be done by the public safety, but there's no additional revenue. I get that. I understand the condition you guys have. But on the other hand, there's this bigger picture, this other mission that I'm trying to fulfill about providing Josephine County with those trained people we need. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to let you all know, when that yellow light goes off, you have 30 seconds left. So I know it's scary, but you have 30 seconds. All right, please come forward.
All right, my name is Greg Rowe. With the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Rogue Valley. We just came out on my board and made a decision we wanted to come out and support RCC because they do put the community in community college. RCC partners with the club and puts family first here in Josephine County by providing STEM programming for our kids. They helped us run 300 girls through a 3-week STEM camp. Yeah, that's a task right there alone. This would not have been possible without their support. We work with them to provide GED programming for our parents and our families. They help our parents take very important steps in getting in the right direction. A lot of our parents are low income. They really help us, with those GED classes and all those other classes, get that going. They also provided classes at our facilities and on campus, like culinary classes for our kids. We employ RCC RCC students, which are vital to our operations. Their small development center provided us with assistance to apply for COVID relief monies when we needed it most, and I'll tell you, that was a lifesaver. You guys helped us out, but the RCC really stepped up with their small business development center. And they also provided the Boys and Girls Club with a new site out there in Kirby, which again does GED programming, other classes, and so forth. But, you know, we as an organization would love to see RCC be able to grow. And I think part of that is our teams are interested in the trades and excited about the possibility. There's talk of a transportation technology center out there at RCC on the Redwood campus. That's life-changing to be able to, you know, get a job in that sector. Our kids, to be honest with you, aren't maybe college first oriented kids. They're trades oriented kids. And like Pat just said, RCC is set up for the trades. And this is what, I mean, I'd love to see that school be just a trade producing machine. You know, that's where all of our kids, you know, should be excited about that. A lot of them don't want to go to college. RCC is that dream for them to be able to do that. Also, you know, whether there's housing or not, if there was housing, you know, 2 of our staff have kids and they go to RCC and work at the club. You know, I know that'd be a lifesaver for them. And you know the housing problem right now it is here in Grants Pass. So we just wanted to put that out there that we support RCC. They support a lot of nonprofits here in Josephine County. So thank you very much. I think they're key to our future. I really do.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Randy Weber. I am the college president at Rogue Community College. I've had an opportunity to meet a couple of you. I appreciate those of you who are able to come out to our science building ribbon cutting. That's an example of opportunity for us to be able to meet the emerging needs of our community. I think most of the points for consideration were made this evening by both of our presenters, so I don't want to really elaborate on either of those. But I did want to add a little bit to say, to what Jay was saying, community colleges, a big part of our mission is to be nimble and responsive to the emerging needs as we're building a local economy. And I think many of us have read the articles recently around declining enrollments in higher education, particularly at community colleges. But one of the things I will point out at RCC is that over the past 5 years plus, our declining enrollments have been really in our lower level transfer classes, in our career and tech ed courses and programs where we put students straight to work. We've actually been flat or inclining. And so basically what that means is that we've continually been asked to put individuals straight into workforce. And in order to do so, we have to make sure that we have adequate training facilities in place. And often our CTE programs take the largest footprints. And I think that what's at question here is our ability to forecast and meet future needs for workforce and community development. Jay had mentioned that for us to consider future funding and that we obviously have to be good candidates for those grants and awards. And so being at capacity makes it really difficult for us to consider what future facility planning for our campus may be. Hopefully the recent investments we've made in our water pump station has shown our responsible, property ownership. And as was said, we would continue to plan to bring future plans to the city for proper consideration. But we appreciate the thought and do hope that while there may be an additional need for resources, I think our past history shows that it's not necessarily much, but our ability to meet the community's demand moving forward would outweigh any of those considerations. Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else who wanted to speak on behalf of the application? All right, is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to the application? All right, does the applicant have further comments? No. Does staff have any further comments?
One thing I forgot to put on the dais tonight, we did receive a letter from CSA which had a few minor grammatical corrections to their findings, which are in the packet tonight. So I just wanted to ask if you do choose to approve, if you could just reference in your motion to include the CSA letter. There's 4 minor amendments. They're grammatical. They're small errors.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And if it's okay, if I could just make a comment too, based upon what I heard tonight, and just, I felt it was important for me just to make a comment, so it's on the record, because I do recognize that over time, and it happens to everybody, sometimes memories do fade, and I wanted to share with you all again that I am confident we can respond to all emergency responses at RCC, and that includes violent crime, active shooter incidents, violent crimes in progress, etc. However, I do believe that non-emergent calls for service will see increased response time, so I wanted to make sure I said that out loud and on the record, and that I did have a fantastic visit with the team at RCC, and we did problem solve these type of concerns through the availability of online reporting and the enhancement of our online performing platform later on. But I would also be remiss if I didn't mention a few things that I believe were left out, and this is probably my fault. I left it out of my initial report. There is a large field out there that could someday be a sports facility of some sort. And if there is a large event out there, my assumption is that Grants Pass Police would be involved in that one way, shape, or form, to include an outdoor auditorium that is on the campus, that if it is available for the community to utilize in the future, that could present a problem later on down the road. But I just wanted to mention that because I thought it was important.
Thanks, Chief. All right. With that, we will close the public comment period and put this before the council for your consideration. Valerie.
Yes, thank you, Chief, for bringing that forward. And I will say that being an educator by trade and also being involved in the Economic Development Committee, training is one of the most important things that helps our community and will help us bring up that low median income that hits us over the head over and over and over again when we're looking for housing. So I do think it's important. I was really glad that I did read it because it was interesting to me about the agreement with the county about the 25% development. So that let me understand that really you can't grow if you're not annexed. So I was also concerned about the public safety because I do know, as wonderful as I know our public safety is, I do know they're strapped. And that it is a concern for all of us, the funding, continued funding of our public safety division, but knowing that you can't grow without being annexed was basically what sealed it for me, because in all of the committees and everything we go to and talk about in our community, it's all about how do we bring in jobs and how do we bring up, our ability for people to earn more money. So in that respect, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion. I move to adopt the ordinance amending the zoning map and annexation with the addition of the noted CSA letter grammatical error corrections, and have it read by title only, first reading.
All right, we got a second from both Brian and Rick there. Is there discussion on the motion? No? All right.
Simple.
Valerie, you made the motion to adopt the ordinance with some minor grammatical amendments. How do you vote?
Yes.
Kurt?
I think I'm going to abstain.
Hang on here. Okay, Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes. Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Motion passes 7 to 1 abstention.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass amending the zoning map and annexing properties located at 3606 27AO, tax lots 1000, 1001, 3606 27AD, tax lots 900, 1000, 1400, 1600, and 360627DO Tax Lot 101.
Thank you, and because that was not unanimous, we'll have the second reading at our next meeting. All right. Next up, council action items. We have a consideration of a resolution to approve the Affordable Housing System Development Charge Waiver Program. Welcome, Amber.
All right. All right, so today I have before you a presentation for the Affordable Housing System Development Charge Waiver Program. So I'll jump right in. So the city is considering the creation of the Affordable Housing System Development Charge Waiver Program to help incentivize construction of new housing that is affordable to residents earning below the area median income. Relationship to council goals. This action relates to the council goal of facilitate sustainable, manageable growth by incentivizing the development of new affordable housing. A little bit of background. Upon receiving recommendations from the Housing Advisory Committee, the City Council began the development of this program in 2020 for the purpose of incentivizing the development of new affordable housing. City Council reviewed a draft of the program requirements on May 24th of 2021 at a workshop and directed staff to adjust the program requirements. In September of 2021, the City of Grants Pass hired a housing and neighborhood specialist, that's me, who also reviewed and provided feedback on the proposed program requirements and expectations. In July of 2022, as part of its housing production strategy, the city staff held 3 focus groups with community stakeholders, including conventional and affordable housing developers, builders, renters, and service providers, to provide feedback on potential housing initiatives to incentivize and encourage development of all types of housing. Feedback from these focus groups, combined with public statements from prior community housing forums regarding the Affordable Housing SDC Waiver Program, did express that the current SDC grant program level of $25,000 does not offer enough incentive to warrant restricting rents for housing providers unless they are already seeking to develop program-restricted affordable housing, such as with LAHDC, HUD, Home, or etc. For developers seeking to construct program-restricted affordable housing, SDC waivers are an extremely powerful incentive and can be meaningful gap funding for the development of new lots, and also a good incentive for developers who maybe weren't considering Grants Pass. They could see that incentive as a reason to now consider Grants Pass. Utilizing this community input that was received, as well as council feedback from the May 24th, 2021 workshop, staff recommends removal of the 50% SDC waiver option for units affordable at 61 to 120% AMI and retain the 100% SDC waiver for affordable housing at 60% AMI or below. And I also want to point out a correction. The Exhibit A included in your packet references ownership housing as an option under this program. Staff does intend to explore an ownership incentive linked to density as opposed to affordability, going back to that feedback we received, but to examine this further after going through with the housing production strategy. Cost implication: the net revenue proceeds from the sale of surplus city property are currently placed in capital project account number. Currently, there's a fund balance of $664,000, and the Housing and Neighborhood Specialist, me again, will administer the program in coordination with the Director and Business Operations Specialist. So call to action is at council discretion. I have a couple alternatives here through. I do also want to point out that we have a very interested potential applicant. That would be the Cathedral Square Affordable Housing Project off of Harbeck Street. They would like to start construction as soon as possible, but they do have a gap that this could potentially fill if they were able to get their application through and approved. So do I have any questions?
Rick, go ahead.
Thank you, Amber. When you have the, like 50% or 100% and so forth, is that automatic, or does anybody have the discretion? Is there a sliding scale, because there could be other components in the development that's occurring where they're receiving other subsidies, and I didn't know if there's the ability for discretion and how much is allocated.
So generally, and I can include this in the finalized version, if you suggest it, we can include that if part of their existing funding covers SDC waivers, that we would not cover that piece, so that we're not double funding.
Thank you.
Joel?
Good presentation, thank you. I was wondering how many units that amount of money would cover in terms of grants, and then I was also wondering the economic incentives of the 100% versus the 50%. How big the gap actually is, and would the 50% be just as effective in filling that gap and providing even more units?
So for reference, the Cathedral Square SDCs come in at just under 300,000. And the amount we have currently is the 664. That project is providing 56 units of affordable housing, should they be able to move forward. That's about 10% of our needed growth for the apartment section on our 20-year growth plan. It's that one project.
So what was the percentage? 10% of the needed growth?
10% of the needed
Okay, so that amount of money
growth.
then would cover up to 30% of the needed growth if it was entirely used?
For apartments, correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Other questions? Vanessa?
Is this program limited to projects that are aimed at rental units? Would an owner occupied?
Currently, yes. With the percentage of 60%, we don't currently see any homes being built at that percentage. We are working with our housing production strategy to, in the future, potentially include a density-based sister to this, utilizing potentially the same fund. This was based off the feedback we got from our focus groups that anything above the actual program restricted affordability rates, developers are not seeing as enough of an incentive to hire a manager and income verify for 30 years.
Rob?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand. On page 194, when the top, basically staff removed the 60%, or the 50% SDC waiver for affordable units, 61 to 120%. Why was that done?
So again, that comes back to our feedback from the focus groups. Developers were stating that in that income range, if they're not already program restricted with LIHTC, HUD, home, those sorts of things that already require them to income verify for that 30-year period, they're not seeing it as enough of an incentive to bring that affordability in and also income verify and hire the manager to make sure that is kept within our regulations.
So thank you, that explains it. And then I guess there's a application form on page 198. It says select housing affordability. It says up to 80% area median income. I guess that would essentially be irrelevant.
So the 80% is still on there because that is a dual application form for CET as well, and our CET does allow going up to 80% currently.
Okay.
Valerie?
Yeah, so I'm just kind of going back on what you just said. There's currently $660,000 in that, and that comes from the sale of the properties. But then you also said that if Cathedral Hills were to use that they have $330,000 or $300,000 in SDC. So by just opening that up, they're going to take half of the money right off the top. And that kind of seems, and they're a HUD, they're a low-income housing tax credit. So it seems to me kind of crazy that my hope was to kind of incentivize some of the other people beside the people that are already getting the low-income house tax credit. And I'm not seeing that happening through this. So that's my concern, is that I'm saying that basically we're just giving the money over to the HUD programs, because that's what they're going to come in and ask for, is 100% of their SDCs, even though they have funding from the state and low-income housing to pay partial SDCs. So that's my concern. So I don't know what my question is there, but my question was that you were saying it was 300,000, so that would basically take half of that money, and I'm not sure they wouldn't build it anyway, even if they didn't have the 100%.
So kind of as a response to that, affordable housing generally requires a lasagna of layers of funding. No one funding is ever going to be able to get the job done on its own. And so if I bring you back to a presentation I did a couple months ago with the puzzle pieces, in terms of us being able to attract developers to do affordable housing, these are some of the most powerful tools that we can provide. And so the SDC waiver was one of the top ones, barring the very top, which was providing the land for free. That's how we can get some outside developers to come and take a look. In terms of the specific Cathedral Square, this is a specific gap that they need to fund through one way or another as a result of the increase of construction costs that has happened in the last couple of years. So this is their last gap that they need to fund for the most part before they can put their shovels in. They were hoping to start in November, and this is that last piece they're hoping to see come in. I am not sure their ability to fill in other ways. I'm sure there are possible other ways, but this would be a good example to developers on the outside as well. We have this program. It's a very powerful one. Come look at Grants Pass.
Any other questions? Joel?
So I'm trying to reconcile what I just heard. Amber, I heard you say, and I don't doubt what you say is true, that it's a powerful tool and the gap is the entire fee for SDCs. And then I heard Valerie say that part of SDCs are paid for by HUD. So are we paying twice? Are we paying them over 100% of the system development charges? I mean, are they getting that at over 100%?
Well, I'm going to go back on if you're asking me, because you're looking at me, so I guess I'll answer. I'm sure that the costs have gone up, and I'm sure that that's just one more way that's keeping them farther from being able to do it. So anything that can help them get started right away and get it up and running would be a positive for them. I just question and worry about how quickly the money goes away. But I will ask this question of you, if it's okay, if it's not my turn. I'm just checking on the Housing Opportunity Fund. So I want the affordable housing system is the 660 that came from the sale of the property that we have, and the Housing Opportunity Fund is money that is being collected by the CET.
Correct.
Correct. So those are being kept separate at that point in time. So, okay, I just wanted to clarify, because I was confused, as Rob was, when I was looking at this, as to why that was said 80% there too. So, okay.
Other questions? Rick, then Vanessa?
So Amber, do you have other than what's stated at this point, do you have an example of an application that we can visualize the process it goes through the different funding mechanisms and waivers to fully understand how this works?
I don't at this time. I did present one at that same presentation with the puzzle pieces to kind of show that lasagna layer of different fundings that things can take. Obviously, it is possible for affordable housing to be developed without these programs. They do get done, but it is an incentive to bring those developers here rather than somewhere else. And that's what we're really trying to do with this program, is to draw attention towards us where we're not currently seeing it.
Vanessa?
Thank you, Amber. In the packet, it says that the department will prepare written recommendations for city council for approval. And then later on, it says that if the amount surpasses $50,000, city council must approve final reward. Is there an expectation that there will be applications from 0 to 50? And if so, is that staff approval?
Not generally. It's just a requirement that we have in terms of funding. Anything over 50,000, council has to approve. I would be surprised if we saw anything below 50,000.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. This is a council action item. Is there anyone from the public who wants to speak on this issue? All right, we will close public comments and turn it over to you, council, for discussion. Brian.
Yeah, I move to adopt the resolution approving the Affordable Housing SDC waiver program.
Is there a second? Vanessa, thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Rick?
So I guess I hate to see double dipping or somebody come in and virtually wipe out our entire account. And I realize we're trying to encourage people to come and have substantial compensation so they're attracted to come to Grants Pass. But I guess I'm hesitant on limiting our ability to respond to various developers that do come in if we totally wipe out our fund. I don't have an answer how to address that, so, but that would be one of my hesitations. Thank you.
Joel?
The only question I have is how to get the most benefit out of the incentive and how to incentivize the projects. And if you over-incentivize one at the expense of the other ones getting done, and I don't have the answer to that. I have to trust the input I've been given by our housing specialist and go forth, but I still have that question. And I know Amber understands the nature of that question, because when the fund's gone, it's gone.
Valerie, then Kurt, then Rob.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest thing, is I know how hard we fought to sell that property and have it all go, and to know that in one project, half of it goes away, and there's no sustainability in that fund. And so I guess that's my question, is how does that fund become sustainable beyond that? If that's just, because I don't know of any other property that we have right out there right now that's for sale. And Aaron has his hand up. Aaron?
I was just going to enter the conversation briefly because there's a common thread of discussion at the moment, and ultimately I think, and Amber, okay, if I misspeak, let me know, but my understanding and talking with you and Brad, et cetera, is with these SDC programs, you can have a program where you're only funding 25% or 50% of the total SDCs, and you may have that fund there, and it may be there for 50 years or 25 years, or you may be able to do little pieces here and there. But with incentivizing affordable housing, especially for developers to come in, you have to really go big or go home type of concept. And so giving property away or at a reduced price is a go big concept. 100% SDC fee waivers is a big concept. That's what will make the difference of putting houses in the ground. So yes, we have discovered a couple of tools that will incentivize affordable housing. Donation of property or drastically reduced cost of property. 100% waiver of SDC fees. These are two tools that we can use, and they're tools that we can implement, and that's why you're discussing this today. One of the issues, though, is it is an effective tool, and it's good to have and you've got to take a look at, or you will deplete your funds. How are you going to replenish that tool? And so the tool, like you said, maybe you only use it for a short time unless we can come up with continual funding sources like a CET or something along those lines to help with these kind of programs.
Well, that was going to be my comment following on Rick's comment. Could we not take the CET funds and repopulate this money
I just wanted to state that exactly, is that we're working on the CET finalization of those programs, and that is one potential that we have identified, is that it will kind of take over for this program if and when those funds do deplete. I do also believe we still are expecting some funds to come in from the sale of the Ramsey, Nebraska property, is that correct? So there's still, for a while, we'll get a little bit more coming in, but we do kind of expect the CET will take over for this as a more sustainable option.
Great, thanks.
Rob?
I'm not an expert in these areas, but it would seem to me that with interest rates being what they are and kind of uncertainty, I'm just not sure how quickly the CET fund is going to accumulate much in the next couple of years. I'd love for it to do really well. I just don't know that that can be counted on with interest rates where they are. I would imagine that there's probably a lot of developers that are kind of afraid to do very much right now. But that wasn't my main point. My main point was, I'm just wondering, I get the concept of go big or go home. I'm just wondering if we could also put, it could be 100% SDC waiver with a potential cap. I mean, we could cap it at 150,000 or something like that, which is still pretty significant, but it also leaves more in that fund to attract more developers for more projects. I could probably support something like that.
Brian?
So the reason I'm comfortable proceeding with it the way it is I'm looking at this through the lens of what are we getting for our money on a per unit basis. So if you take the Ramsey property as an example, we're incentivizing that project with $1 million piece of land, and we're going to be getting 66 units out of it. That works out to be about $15,000 of incentive per unit for that project. If you compare that to what we're talking about here, we're talking about $300,000 for a 55-unit project, which works out to be only about $5,000 per unit that the city is putting forward. So in an amount per unit that the city's putting forward, this is an excellent deal compared to the Ramsey project. And yes, it's a non-sustainable fund, but this is what the purpose of the fund is, to get these units built. And earlier this year, I met with Aaron and I went over a whole list of city-owned properties that we haven't yet considered for sale, and there's potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars there to help replenish this fund, along with the Ramsey funds. So I'm very comfortable moving forward.
Any further discussion? All right, so we have a motion on the table to adopt the resolution approving the Affordable Housing SDC Waiver Program. And Brian, you made the motion, so how do you vote?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
TJ?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. All right. To figure out where I've tucked my agenda here. Okay, next up we have to consider a resolution that would authorize the city manager to amend the current agreement with Slayden Construction Group for the construction of the membrane procurement for the water treatment plant. Hello, Jason.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the time. Pretty excited about this presentation. So subject and summary, I'm going to give a brief update on where we are, kind of bring you up to date on Phase 1A, which was technology, 1B, which was membrane system selection, which is really, this presentation is the outcome of that. And then 1B services, which are design, and then of course 1D, which is the actual purchase, mostly purchase of the membrane system. So on September 15th of 2021, we did approve Phase 1A services with Slayden Construction and Carollo, and that was to begin the technology selection. And I know that you've heard all of this, so I'm going to kind of get to the meat of the presentation. But it did include a number of workshops. The outcome of those workshops is that council selected membrane filtration with powdered activated carbon as the desired or preferred alternative. It provided a very positive barrier with high quality finished water, very cost-effective technology to combat future contaminants, that being the powdered activated carbon, something that we could turn on and off as we needed it. Provided for a very high level of automation, allowing us to operate 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with minimal staffing after hours. And it offered a slightly lower initial capital costs while being offset with slightly higher operations costs. We did show you a number of selected layouts to show that not only did it fit the site today, but it did fit it for the ultimate build out at 45 MGD, along with some potential concepts of what it might look like on the inside when we finally start getting everything constructed. We are a long way from this, by the way. So council also approved Phase 1B services on June 15th, and 1B was to select the membrane system supplier. And as you recall, we talked about this, the design actually can't move forward until we choose a membrane system supplier because so many of the decisions, pump sizes, pipe sizes, how big the racks are, location of how big the buildings have to be to house all of this, all revolved around that system. On August 8th, the design builder issued a request for proposals to the membrane community and 3 responses were received. I do want to back up a little bit. 1C services, you did approve that on September 7th. The 1C, it will start to proceed. We've actually already had a couple of initial meetings, but really they'll kick into high gear once we make a decision on the membrane system today. So, getting into the details. 3 proposals were received from qualified firms. Those were evaluated by Slayden primarily and Carollo, along with our owner's agent Stantec and city staff, and that was based upon published scoring criteria. So in the RFP, we told all of the suppliers how we were going to grade their proposals. H2O Innovations was selected as the best value proposal for the city. One proposer, and we'll get to this in a second in a little bit more detail, was deemed to be non-responsive because they did not include a performance guarantee with their proposal. And I think that you would agree a performance guarantee is a very important thing on a project of this scale. So this is the scoring criteria that we had published for the membrane system suppliers. And as you can see, 70% of it is based on cost, 45% of total capital costs with an additional 15% being based on the long-term operating costs. Actually, there's 5 more related to cost, and that is the extended service agreement. It was very important to us that we had a long-term contract with that firm to get us not just past the warranty period, but maybe the next 3 to 5 years beyond that to make sure that as we're learning this system, we have the expertise at our disposal. The other primary considerations were deviations of the proposal from the criteria. So we gave them a book about that thick, actually I think it was really about that thick, and we said these are all of the things that you need to provide to us, and then we scored them based on how far they deviated from that proposal. So if they deviated a lot, they didn't get a lot of points. If they pretty much gave us exactly what we asked for, they got the full 15 points for that item. The last one was innovations and alternates, and we really wanted to offer the firms the opportunity to come in and wow us, show us how we can do this better than what we told you to give us. And that firm that gave us the best innovation would score the full 20 points. Those that provided lesser options or less innovation or less value would receive slightly lower points. I get excited when I talk about this stuff, sorry if I start talking too fast. So we did do a best value evaluation. As you can see, we had 3 firms. Firm number 1 provided us with the lowest absolute capital cost. However, they also did not include a performance warranty. They were uncomfortable with the flow rates that we specified with their system operating at that flow rate. So that's really a non-starter for us. The second firm provided a very simple or similar system. They were comfortable providing that same warranty. So we were good to move forward. H2O Innovation, you can see where they stacked up overall. To break into a couple of it, the 2 Wigan Technologies, I'm going to probably saying that right, or incorrectly, it could be Wigan or Wigan, I'm going to go stick with Wigan. Both had very minor deviations from the contract. Every vendor is going to have exceptions to the contract terms and provisions that we provide. Both of these firms had very minor requests for revisions that were easily negotiated out by Slayden and Carollo. They had very, very similar operating costs, and the initial capital costs were very similar, with H2O Innovation actually being $100,000 higher than Wigan, but they provided more opportunities to reduce that cost, which we're going to talk about next, which is the important part. And then on to the alternatives, the innovations and alternatives, and this was really where H2O Innovation shined. They brought forward a laundry list of opportunities for the city to change the configuration, as well as just in their standard proposal, they offered some exceptional value which will serve the city well into the future if you choose to consider this. So they were the highest value and most conforming, and when I say highest value, not the highest price. They were not the absolute highest price, but they provided the most long-term value for the city, and they were the most conforming proposal at the time of bid. They provide open platform, not just with the membranes, which I know is desirable to the council, but their software is open. So what that means is that if we need somebody to get in to fix something or slightly change the way in which that system does, I can hire a programmer, they can get into the software and make those alterations for us. All of the other vendors provide closed software, which means I can pay them to come and make a modification for us, but nobody else. They also, in their initial proposal, provided 27% more membrane area than the other proposers. And why is that important? It allows us to operate the system at a lower rate, which will extend the life of the membranes. They're not being pushed so hard. They utilize stainless steel piping as opposed to plastic throughout the proposal. That is a huge value and is their standard. And the reason for that is the plastic piping tends to expand and contract a lot in the heat and the cold. And what can happen is those fittings can break over time. That doesn't happen with stainless steel. They also provided the most durable valve in their initial proposal. This valve, we are asking these valves, we're asking the manufacturers to guarantee their valves for 1 million cycles with only a 5% failure rate. That's a pretty big ask of a valve. The valve that they provided in their quote will meet that. And on top of all of that, their proposal had the smallest rack footprint. What that means is we can make our building a little bit smaller. And that saves a lot of money because the more square foot we build, the higher the cost goes. And then the big one, which we're going to talk about it more in a minute, but they also provided the best alternative rack configuration, which means not only did they provide us with the smallest one, but they said, but you know, we can do even better than that, which was pretty impressive. So following the acceptance of the initial proposal, the design build team did negotiate with H2O on a number of the innovations and value proposals. And I want to go through some of those. So they proposed using HDPE or XLPE, that is high, I'm going to get this all wrong, cross-linked polyethylene and HD, what's the HD one? High density, thank you. From the back in the audience, I appreciate that. For the clean in place tanks, we had specified fiberglass reinforced plastic. And the reason we specified fiberglass reinforced plastic is they are a very rigid tank. They have a very, very long lifespan, and they are less prone to failure. The HDPE and the XLPE are a much softer plastic, and as those tanks fill and drain, the sides of the tank bow, and then they shrink back in, and that continued expansion and contraction causes them to fail prematurely. Both the owner's advisor and the design build team have recommended we not accept that alternative. We are leaving it in the mix as a future value engineered item. We may come back and put this in as we are looking for every dollar. However, what happens here is if we put these in, we may find out that we are replacing them far more frequently, which is then a manpower and labor issue in addition to being able to try and get the tanks in and out of the building. The other reason that these are not desirable is these are heated tanks. So we actually put heat in there because we want those chemicals hot when we're washing the membrane system. That causes them also to fail a little bit prematurely. Allowing H2O Innovations to provide the manufacturer's services. Normally with a new plant construction, every manufacturer who has a piece of equipment installed comes in, says, yep, you've installed that correctly. I sign off and we validate the warning. H2O has worked out agreements with all of the manufacturers that they provide, that they are able to provide those services to us without affecting any of the factory warranty at a savings of about $58,000 on the project. The next two are about the same, but it's deleting shelf spares. So we specified, as we know, redundancy is key when it comes to the water filtration plant. We specified that we wanted shelf spares. So we have a pump installed, we have a pump on the shelf. The reason we feel comfortable eliminating these pumps is all of these pumps are installed in what's called an N+1 configuration. That means I have the correct number of pumps to do the job plus an entirely redundant spare. And because we already have an installed spare, we can put off these purchases till much, much, much later, maybe even 5 years after plant startup or even beyond that. And so it allows us to budget that. We don't need to include them in the purchase package. That's a $100,000 savings. The manufacturer, H2O, did suggest substituting, or a potential substitute would be Bray controls for the Rotork valves, but they would then also want a corresponding reduction in the valve warranty. We were not willing to take that on. We want that longer life cycle with a lower failure rate. The other thing that we had asked about is, okay, we asked most of the other manufacturers were providing about 496 modules. They had proposed to provide 630. They went, absolutely, we can do that. We will reduce your price by 321. However, that's going to also come with a corresponding reduction in the performance warranty on the system, which we do not feel is a good, not a good thing for the city. But they did say, however, we expect a 6+1 configuration. That means that there are 7 racks total, 6 that are online, and 1 that's always cleaning or washing, and then as you take another one offline, it pops on. They said we can do this even better in a 5+1 configuration. That'll save you $300,000 and some, which we believe is a very good investment. So then there were a couple of additions that we needed to put in, and that is, the first one was the FRP tanks, the fiberglass reinforced plastic tanks that were specified, did not include the 5-year warranty as we had requested, but only a standard off-the-shelf 1-year warranty. To extend that warranty from 1 to 5 years was an additional $13,000. We currently have that included. The other one, and I'm going to talk about more on this in the next couple of slides, so I'm going to go past it pretty fast, but is to accommodate the future installation of what's called crossflow. And crossflow is a way of operating the membranes where we bypass a certain percentage of flow, and we'll talk more about that. We also had them include the price for implementing the crossflow, and as you can see, there's no green check mark on that. We are not planning on including that at this time, but we wanted to know what it was going to cost should we determine through the rest of the process that it's needed. There was another subtraction, and that was on a really exciting item, supply bond. We did require them to provide us a supply bond that says, just guarantees that they will provide what they said they did. However, we had them taking out that supply bond at the time of signing contract, and really we don't need that until we release that item to be built. That's about 1.5 years out, so we save about 1.5 years worth of bonding costs. And then the last one was the inclusion of a 6-month pilot test, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in detail too, but we are asking that the council does include this because we are now talking about a different manufacturer than what we had piloted previously, and granted that pilot was super successful. This is a different supplier, different membrane manufacturer, so we think we may want to consider this. So, crossflow. As I talked about, crossflow is a way of operating a membrane in which we bypass 10% of the flow that we're putting into the membrane past it. Our limited experience, Adam and I was on the pilot, and that did operate in crossflow mode. With our dirty water, it allows water to continually flush past all the membranes, potentially. This is one of those scientific teacher can argue it one way or another ways. We are now going out and visiting plants that are configured just like ours is to kind of get a better feel for whether or not we need to consider. We do recommend we invest the $36,000 to at least allow the design to accommodate it should it be needed in the future. We are not recommending that we spend the full $174,000 at this point to install it because there would be additional charges. So the $174,000 would build it into the membrane system, but then we also have to get bigger pumps, bigger electrical gear, bigger, so there's a lot of decisions. We're not ready to do this, but we don't want to exclude it this early in the process. We think it's a very important thing. The other one is the pilot study. And we are asking that these funds be included in this task order. We don't know if we're going to execute this portion of the contract yet. We want to wait until Adam and his team finish up with some site visits, talk with a few other operators who are operating systems identical to ours, or what will be nearly identical to ours, to get a better feel for where they are having problems. If we see a consistent problem throughout multiple facilities, we will likely go ahead and exercise this $117,000 pilot test, hopefully not doing the full 6 months where we can shorten that up pretty dramatically and reduce that cost. But that would give us a better feel for what we needed to include in the final product. So we are asking that it be included, but we are not, at this point, we're not planning on spending it. So the final proposal from the membrane supplier is $6.667 million. With the design builder fees, that brings us to a total of $7.17 million for the procurement. The project costs have not changed from what we've been presenting at the last couple of meetings. We're still in that same price range. And while we are signing an agreement for $7.17 million, it is very important to note that we are now only obligating $517,900. That is the $117,000 for the pilot study, which we may not do, and $400,000, which is the fee from the design bill, or from the from the membrane system supplier to do the complete design of the membrane system. Only we will come back to you to release this for production. So there's still a stopping point. We are not buying a membrane system that if we choose to take the off-ramp when we get to the GMP, that we now own a membrane system and no building and nothing to put it in. This is just heading that direction, and we are only obligating the design and the potential pilot testing. We do have the tentative call to action date as today, but that can be deferred at your discretion, and with that, I would love to take your questions.
Thanks, Jason. What questions do you have? Rick?
Thank you, Jason. I reviewed the report and found it very interesting, and of course, any type of filtration, especially when you're talking about these filters, one thing that really concerned me is how dirty the Rogue River can be.
Yeah.
And as you start putting in water that is very cloudy and so forth, it will plug the filters real fast.
Yeah.
And there was some discussion in the report about pre-treatment to take some of that out. Would that include possibly ballasted flocculation, or does that go too far?
Too far. So that's a great point, Councilor Riker. We are currently planning on installing pre-treatment, right? Oops, let me turn my laser on here for you. Right here. It's going to be sized for wintertime flows only. We will not use that in the summer, or if it is, it's just going to be a wide spot in the pipe. But what that's going to allow us to do is knock the turbidity down that we see in the Rogue River down to a level that's near a summertime level, to keep the water going to the membranes very consistent, to combat just that thing.
Super, I appreciate that. Is there any advantage to be, I would say, off-site, use our existing water treatment plant for that very purpose, or its off-site location doesn't have?
No, I'm giggling at Wayne because we actually looked at this very extensively. Unfortunately, it greatly increases our pumping costs because we then have to pump it in, we break the head again, then have to pump it and break the head again, and then pump it again. So it added a full another pumping step.
That's understandable. Thank you.
Other questions? Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. My question is revolving around the last time we talked about this. You said you had reached out to our rate consultant to see if the current estimated cost could be supported by our current rate structure, and I was just wondering if we had heard back from them yet.
Yeah, I mean, we're still crunching it, but JC and I have met with them multiple times based on the projections. It does fit, but there will be rate increases a few years out based on these numbers, which we don't believe are the final numbers, without finding additional funds or grants. So it was out, I want to say it was several years that we would need rate increase, because what will happen is we can cover the debt for a while, but then our debt ratios, which is we can still make the payments, but we start eating into that amount that we're supposed to have set aside to cover that debt payment.
Okay. I think it'd be appropriate for council to have some sort of documentation on that so we can be informed on what we might be looking at for the financing of this project as that information is available.
Okay.
Thank you.
DJ?
So bear with me, I have about 45 questions.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. I'm so excited about this. I share the excitement with you. I would love to sit and talk with you, about this. This is very exciting stuff. I do have one question. So for this cross-flow technology, it's 36 to allow for the system to be accommodated in the future, 175 fully implement. Is that 175 minus that initial 36 investment, or is it the 36 and then on top it's going to take the 175 to implement if we need?
It's in addition. The 36 is just to make sure that it's included in the design.
Sure.
If we actually choose to do it, there's a whole nother set of stainless steel pipes and valves, and so all of that then pays for that other, all those other pieces.
Sure, very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Is there anyone here from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? All right, we'll close the public comment and turn it over to council for discussion. Joel?
So I guess this goes in the realm of a question rather than discussion. In terms of the budget for the 111 million then, and this coming in at this level, is this within that? So this is the actual cost versus the projected cost. And so is it about the same, or greater, or less than?
You did not see that. It's a little higher than what we had included in the original projection, but there is still room to negotiate on that price. As you saw, there's still a couple items that we left in that would put it about where we were projecting it to be.
Valerie, then Rick?
Yeah, I guess my kind of question was kind of the same thing, that basically this is the amount of it's going to cost, and then, but we're only obligating a certain amount until the whatever it is, the actual date that we say run with it, or we're going to back off. So this is kind of like, I just wanted to clarify that that is part of the final numbers, but we're just at this point just doing the anyway, part of it, and it's less than, could be just 400,000. So
Yes.
so it's just pieces of the puzzle that we're putting together for the end. So I just wanted clarity on that as well.
Were you wanting an answer, or?
Yeah. Can I go ahead and move to adopt?
Well, Rick had his hand up,
Okay,
but
Rick.
I don't know. I guess you got your question answered,
Yes,
or?
yes, I
Okay.
did.
Okay, Rick?
So Jason, I know concrete has just been one of the items that has increased in cost substantially, and I imagine there's a lot of real long laundry list of other items. Is there any anticipation that those prices could come down in the future, which would also radically change I realize it goes both ways, but.
I'm going to say this, and I don't want to be flippant. I am highly anticipating those prices coming down. I don't, right now, it's really hard to predict. They keep working on the interest rate, but of course the interest rate has a negative effect on us on the other side. We are seeing the construction indices trend. They're kind of flattening, but But what we really, really need to see them do is turn the corner and head the other direction. Now, we've still got a full 18, 20 months before we're really talking about serious construction. So there's definitely some time, you know, and we'll be back in front of you with the GMP. And what we would really highly recommend, if we get to the GMP and it is not where we can afford it, we would be recommending that we take the off-ramp. And at that point, we button everything up. We have a complete bid-ready set of documents, complete with every piece of equipment, and we put that on the shelf for a year or two, and you watch that construction market, and when that construction market gets a little bit more favorable, then you put that package out to bid.
Okay, thank you.
Joel?
So Jason, then what you're asking us to decide today is the $517,000 for being obligated at this time, or the membrane purchase at $7 million?
It is, but to be clear,
No,
we
which
are...
Which one is it? Which one is it?
It's a little both. We are agreeing to purchase that membrane system from the membrane system supplier. However, that unit does not go into manufacture until we tell them to. So if we get to at the GMP and we hit pause, at that point, that price will just sit there for us. Now, there is a mechanism in the contract, you may have read it in there, that if the inflation moves excessively one way or the other, we both get to take advantage of that. If it goes down, it's in our favor. If it goes up, it's in their favor. But we've agreed on that. That's especially if it sits for a very long time. Now, we are really right now only obligating the $517,000, but we may not spend the 117. We're still working on the site visits. The site visits will inform the pilot test, which I'll report back to you guys and through the manager's report. But it is the 400,000 and possibly the 117.
So then, just to clarify what I think I heard you say, the decision before us today is to allocate the entire $7.1 million, of which $517,000 or $400,000, depending on whether the pilot testing would be obligated at this time.
Yeah.
And then there might be some future flexibility in the other $6.6 million.
Valerie? And with that, I'm going to move to adopt the resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Slayden Construction Group for Phase 1D services, membrane procurement relating to the replacement water treatment plant.
All right, and Kurt seconded that. Any discussion on the motion? All right. Val, you made the motion to adopt the resolution. How do you vote?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Brian?
I need to abstain until I have information from our rate consultant about what the rate's going to look like, so I abstain.
Joel?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
All right, motion passes 7 to 0 to 1. All right, next up, item C is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a subrecipient agreement with the City of Grants Pass and the Josephine Housing and Community Development Council and the Housing Authority of Jackson County. Looks like Augustus is presenting.
All right. Evening, Mayor Council. So I'm here to present a subrecipient agreement with the Josephine County Housing and Community Development Council and the Housing Authority of Jackson County. So the background of this is these two housing councils and housing entities have an interest in creating additional affordable housing units in Grants Pass. And as of right now, council has allocated $3,014,662 in coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. Just read that as ARPA funds for affordable housing. And so the appropriate use of this funding includes supportive housing and other services for individuals experiencing homelessness and the development of affordable housing.
So I'm going to take you briefly through the subrecipient agreement. It's not terribly long and it's not terribly complicated, but there's some things I want to make sure that are highlighted for you, and we'll also go over a couple of things that I've identified as needing a little bit more clarification I want to run by you. So the effective date is upon execution. The contract will continue for 12 months. I think that should probably be extended a little bit. So I'd like to leave that at your discretion, but that's my first flag. The total that's going to be dispersed is up to $3,014,662, with the limitation of the use of those funds on the eligible services in accordance with the Treasury guidelines regarding ARPA funding. So for reporting, the Housing Council and the Housing Authority are going to have to keep track of that money. They're going to have to make reporting to us annually, and the expenditures are going to have to be provided to the city in an itemized invoice, indicating that the expenditures comport with all of the ARPA guidelines as they may change from time to time. So the timeline for disbursement. So this is kind of a unique agreement in that we'll be reimbursing their expenditures instead of giving them just a lump sum of cash. So whenever we receive reimbursement requests, we'll be paying them no later than 20 days after receipt of the reimbursement request. And this is, of course, after the city is going to review and approve the expenditure request. Next, the grant, I have it as grantee, but the subrecipient will be required to retain all records for 6 years pertaining to the subrecipient agreement and funds delivered, and for a time longer if there's some sort of auditing that's happening for any time until that auditing is concluded. Evolution of ARPA guidelines is just basically saying that the rules for ARPA will, as they change from time to time, the rules are just going to move as the guidelines change. So we're going to move into the termination provisions. I have 3 termination provisions and 1 material breach provision. So termination for convenience, that the city may terminate the agreement at any time for any good faith reason within 30 days, with 30 days written notice. And good faith means to act with fidelity to the agreement. It's an obligation not to act dishonestly or with dishonest motive. And so upon termination for convenience, the subrecipient would be entitled to receive reimbursement for all allowable expenditures made up to the date of termination, work completed up to the date of termination, and reasonable termination or demobilization charges actually charged to the subrecipient agreement associated with the termination. So that means that if something happened a year from now and the city was unable to meet its obligations, or there's just a huge economic downturn and there's something that necessitated the city having to get out of this agreement, the termination of the contract would wind up so that the housing authorities would be made whole. So it's a kind of a predictive way to see, how the contract itself would terminate. Then we move to termination by mutual consent, which is both parties agree to terminate the contract. We have a default for material breach. Now this involves, I'd like to outline, there's a difference between a breach of a contract and the termination of a contract. A termination of the contract is when the parties agree or one party has to basically say that, hey, we got to wind this up somehow, we're not going to be able to finish the full term. A breach is when somebody violates a provision of the contract. So we're looking at intentional acts or omissions, misuse of funds, falsification of records, things that trend towards the dishonesty of one of the parties. And so this would constitute a breach for which damages would be awarded to whichever party was breached. And then there's a termination for default and for cause. So if something comes up that's completely out of the city's control, whether that's a change in federal law, whether that's a license or approval that isn't held by the housing authorities, whether they're not able to get their permits, whether they're not able to meet certain obligations, at that point, the city would be able to terminate the contract for cause. And then if one of the parties fails to adhere to the terms of the agreement, there's a time period by which the parties can cure that breach. So it's 40, I think we have it as 45 days, meaning so there could be a breach of contract. There's a written notice given to the party saying, hey, you're in breach of the contract in this provision, this provision, this provision. They would have 45 days to cure those breaches in order to avoid default for cause under the contract. So after that, we're looking at the boilerplate provisions. Pretty standard in terms of what you would expect from a government contract. So for the clarification on termination, this is the second thing I'd like to highlight for council. Under paragraph 8, I outlined essentially the rights of the parties for termination for convenience. What I'm thinking I'd like to do is I'd like to break up that paragraph 8 and make the second half of that paragraph its own paragraph that outlines the rights of the subrecipient if there's any sort of termination for anything other than a material breach. So it'll outline it'll outline a termination, what happens in the case of a termination for convenience. It will outline what happens for a termination for mutual consent and termination for cause. So there's a little bit more clarity about how the parties would move forward in such a case. So your call to action date is at your discretion, and staff is asking to approve the resolution with the modifications as stated herein. And with that, I turn it over to Mayor Council for questions.
Thank you. Council, do you have questions? Rick and then DJ?
Thank you, Augustus. So when we, the council, were and the ARPA funds were over $9 million, and we designated $3 million to go to affordable housing. How does that, we've been informed that there's a shortage of housing at all levels, low income, middle income, high income, and we've heard from the hospital when they have new doctors and nurses coming in, they can't find housing. So when we look at this, and if this contract is solely for the Jackson and Josephine County housing authorities, how do we know that there's going to be, say, 1/3 of the money will go for low, 1/3 of the money will go for medium, 1/3 for high, or a developer comes in, and they may be a for-profit developer, and they want to provide some high-income housing, they have no opportunity to access any of this $3 million. How does that work?
So for the ARPA funding, that's specifically for the development of affordable housing, right? So if somebody wants to come in and build high-income housing, that is income for individuals who are making a high amount of money, that's more than the threshold that's set out for affordable housing, the ARPA funds wouldn't be available for that development anyway. And so, I'm sorry.
So you're saying high-income housing is not eligible for this program?
That's correct.
How about middle-income housing?
It's affordable housing, and that's defined by HUD guidelines.
But I thought they had certain percentages that for that income range.
I don't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head, but I want to say it's 80%.
Okay, thank you.
DJ, then Joel?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. One of those provisions says repeated non-material breaches. I'm not questioning the merit of having that clause. I'm just looking for maybe an example of a repeated non-material breach.
Yeah. Perhaps an example of that would be submitting the reporting late over and over and over again.
Sure.
That something that would put the city in kind of a tough position in terms of like auditing, or not having the records available when we ask for it, having to wait for a long time to get access to certain records so we can inspect the books, things like that.
Okay. Second question would be, so this notions that a partnership, if you will, between Jackson Housing Authority and Josephine Housing Authority. And so I'm curious about that partnership. Do they have an agreement amongst the authorities to operate in Grants Pass? How does that work as far as them, agreeing and communicating amongst each other for the affordable housing in Grants Pass?
So in a partnership, it would probably be in a partnership form like this. They probably have some sort of written agreement. They have already gone in together on other projects. I think Cathedral Hills comes to mind as being one of those examples. And my understanding is that having that partnership also makes it easier for them to apply for grants and other monies from the state in order to develop affordable housing.
Okay. As far as utilization of funds, of course, it'll be on a receipt basis and a reimbursement basis. Are the parameters just basically affordable housing as demonstrated by HUD, so they could infrastructure or construction of the building or system development charges or any and all of the above? Is it a pretty loose provision?
So it's not, I wouldn't call it a loose provision. So that's dictated by the Treasury rules that kind of supplement the ARPA funding and that and essentially the entire federal law. So it's going to be used for infrastructure, things like purchasing the property, things like making connections for sewer lines, things like that are clearly outlined in the Treasury rules as being an allowable use. So the rules are quite specific and quite clear about what an allowable use in the development of affordable housing is.
Mm-hmm. So in our discussions with both the Housing Council and Housing Authority, it's their intent that this money will likely go to the purchase of property. So it's not going to be, well, we'll use it for this and we'll use it for that, and it'll be nickel and dime. It's going to probably be for one large lump sum to acquire property. And it needs to be at a program that is affordable up to 20 years and as low income as it is at or below 65% of the local median income.
That answers that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to just add some more ARPA rules in there as well, the financial implications. So because it is joint between two counties, the proportion at which the project is, our $3 million needs to proportionally directly serve our city. So if they were to try and do it in multiple areas, we would have to get a proportionate share of our money inside Grants Pass.
When you say differing areas, do you mean in a different county, or do you mean a different area of our county or Josephine County? What do you mean by differing areas?
So if they got like $20 million in a pot of money, our $3 million would need to serve our proportionate share of the total project if that's what they were going to go for.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Joel?
At least that much. Yeah, okay. So then, I think you already answered my question, but I want to make sure I understand it. So the Housing Authority actually can leverage these dollars with HUD and with the Oregon Housing Authority and with private investors, is that correct? And contractors.
That's correct.
And so I've had several people approach me and wanting to invest in that. They can just contact the Housing Authority directly and work through that, and same with the contractor.
Correct.
That's great. Thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you. First, I appreciate your providing more detail on the termination for convenience part of the contract. I think that's very helpful. And then I had a question about, I don't know exactly what to call this. I guess I'll just call it a performance guarantee for right now, but is there anything in the contract that kind of describes we're giving $3 million to these agencies and this is what we might get in return? I didn't see anything in there about that, but I know in other housing projects we've worked on, there's been, a unit number or some metric.
There is nothing like that in this contract. I don't remember. I think our preliminary discussions had been anywhere between 50 and 100 units of affordable housing to be developed, and I understand that that's kind of broad, and I'm I could try to get a more exact number for you.
Okay, thank you.
Rick?
So Aaron, I just want to confirm, did I hear you correctly that you said 65% of low to medium income?
Local area median income, it's the 65 percentile that they were looking at. It's, 80, 120, 60. It's 20 years and 65% is what the target is.
So again, it's not just low income.
I think that's the definition of low income.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? No? All right, thank you. Augustus?
And I'll make sure I see if I can get a more solid number on the units.
Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? All right, we'll close public comment and turn it over to council for discussion. Brian, then Val.
So just following up on my question with a comment, I do have a little bit of concern with us approving a contract for $3 million without really knowing what we might get for it with respect to number of units. On the Ramsey project, we incentivized this much money and the project is this many units, and we could figure out how much we paid per unit as a city to get that built. Same thing with the project we talked about earlier, $300,000, 55 units, ended up being about $5,000 the city was paying per unit. For this project, if we give $3 million and we're only getting 100 units, that works out to be $30,000 per unit, which costs us twice as much as the Ramsey project or 6 times as much as the one we talked about previously tonight. So I would like to have a little more specificity as to what we might be getting for our $3 million than what information I have right now.
Valerie?
Well, I don't know that they can give you that until they find the land and they really do the research on it. So I think it's just no different than, when they went out for the Ramsey, they kind of have to know what piece of land they have to get an idea of what they can put on that land. So it's kind of like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know what the answer to that is. I think the purpose behind this was just knowing that Jackson County Housing has a track record of getting housing developments through the state, because they've done numerous ones, and having our housing council come on board with that to see how it works and that sort of thing. So I'm not sure if you can, how you put that into this. So I think you have to have a certain amount of trust that they're in there looking out for the best interests of what they think is going to get through the state, because that's what this is a seed money is basically what we're doing, because the projects cost $28 million. So this is just one piece to get them started working for that piece of land, to get started working with it. So seeing as we had said this is how we wanted to spend it, I would go ahead and move to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the subrecipient agreement, providing ARPA funds up to $3,014,662 to the Jackson Housing Authority and what is it, the Josephine, I don't know what all those is, JHCDC and the HHAC to develop affordable housing in Grants Pass.
Is there a second? Joel? Okay, is there discussion on the motion? DJ?
Yeah, I didn't organize my questions. Typically I do, and I actually had a question. If I recall correctly, you had mentioned something about recommending extending time effective past 12 months.
Yeah.
Right, can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because I don't want to bypass that recommendation. I want to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Sure. Just kind of taking into account the uncertainty over the next year, it's possible they may not find a piece of property, and I don't want to put council in a position where they might be foreclosing the use of that money for sooner than 12 months. So I think that my suggestion would be probably up to 2 years.
Well, given that's legal counsel's recommendation, I tend to agree with that.
I would agree with that, yes.
I think we'd need to amend the motion to allow for that extension.
Yes, I would do that.
And also for me to change the termination provision to break it out, so
Yes.
we have more certainty about how the contract will wind up with all the different types of terminations possible.
Yes.
Valerie, did you want to do
Yes,
those two amendments?
I wanted both of those, I assumed, and I forgot about the 12-month, but you're right. I think in the circumstances, 12 months would be really fast. I think, when does the money have to be spent by? Is it the 20?
December 2026.
Okay,
And the money has to be allocated by December 2024.
okay. All righty, so yeah, that still gives plenty of time. No, I would agree with the two of those, thank you.
So are you recommending extending it until that December of '24?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
Valerie and Joel both agree to those amendments. Rick, did you have a hand up?
So I have a comment. Is it appropriate time?
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm comfortable with it. I'm in favor of affordable housing, but I guess I feel like this is a blank check of which there is really no parameters as far as what we would get from it. And I'm not sure if we have the ability to put that in there or if they would be willing to respond. I'm not comfortable at the moment. Thank you.
Brian?
Is there a representative from either housing authority here tonight that might be able to expound on this concern?
It looks like there is.
Okay.
Hello, I am Ryan Haynes. I am the Director of Real Estate Development for the Housing Authority of Jackson County. And I was sitting back there. I didn't want to speak without JHCDC present and kind of interrupt, get in front of them on this one. So, but what was the first question you had?
Just the concern about with this $3 million, we don't know the potential for the number of units that we might be able to see from that.
Yeah, we have been looking, quite frankly, for land in the Grants Pass area for several years. We have really had a hard time finding the right parcel. There are a few that we have identified that we think would be potentially good opportunities for, as housing sites. There are a couple that aren't formally on the market, so we may have to make an approach to a landowner to see if they want to sell. There are a couple that are on the market where I think the price does not reflect probably the value of the property. So we have a pretty intensive due diligence process that we have to go through in order to acquire a site. So as far as the number of units that we would be delivering for $3 million here, it's really going to be dependent. It's very site specific, as Councilor Lovelace indicated.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions while Ryan's here? Rick?
Yes.
So when you look at a site or look at a project, do you ever have a limit that you're willing to do, or in other words, go into because of your overhead? You say, I realize that the project doesn't pencil, it doesn't go forward.
Right.
But do you have a philosophy also? For instance. Okay.
No, yeah, we have to break even on the construction costs, the amount of rents that we can charge. So these are typically financed with what's known as the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, or LIHTC. And they limit housing affordability to 60% AMI on that. So the rents that you can charge at a 60% AMI, those are actually published by the state OHCS, and they're available on the website. So those are the maximum rents that can be charged. And it's, I will say, substantially below what market rents are. And so the construction costs you have to balance against those significantly lower rents. So we have to find a way to break even. We can't lose money on developments and the operating expenditures moving forward. Otherwise, we'd be out of business, 5 years from now, and then who else is developing affordable housing in Jackson and Josephine County?
And we do have a great relationship with JHCDC. They are not developers. We have developed well over 2,000 units in Jackson County, and we, recognizing that JHCDC also would like to develop housing in Josephine County, we've been partnering with them on Cathedral Square, which will be breaking ground, knock on wood, in November, and and we are going to partner with them on this project as well to find a site, and it really is a joint partnership with us. We're working with them. We're helping them develop their capacity to do future development in the future without us. But until they build that expertise, we're happy to help.
Thank you.
Sure.
Joel?
Do you have a business card you can leave with us?
I'd be happy to, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions while he's here? All right, thanks for being here.
Sure.
Turn it back over to council for any further discussion on the motion. All right, guess we're ready to vote. So Valerie, you made a motion to approve with the amendments that Augustus had suggested, extending the 12 months and changing the termination for convenience clause. How do you vote?
I vote yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
And Rick?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. All right. Hopefully a good step forward there for our affordable housing issues. A couple of those decisions tonight. How about item D, a resolution that would authorize the city manager to enter into a contract for new design of Grants Pass Caveman Pool?
Good evening, council. Josh Hopkins, Park Superintendent. Let me just find it in here. So we're here today to request approval for a resolution for our city manager to enter into a contract for the new design for the Caveman Pool. This is a result of the RFP we published back in July of 2015. The number one ranking design firm we found through our design review committee was Robertson Sherwood Architects, PC. This is related to council goals through the enhanced community safety by ensuring city aquatic facilities are meeting and maintaining state minimum standards for public use, and then maintain, operate, and expand our city infrastructure to meet the needs of the community by appropriately maintaining the existing capital assets. A little bit of background, back in 2019, Pure Water Aquatics did do an assessment of the pool where they found a lot of deficiencies. That kind of spurred the conversation of what to do next, and there were many meetings after that. June 6, 2022 is the last meeting we had with council on this, where we gained insight for what council would like to see happen with the pool, what features, what type of design materials you'd like us to use, and we use that to incorporate in creating the RFP, which we did publish in July 15, 2015. Here's the schedule that we had listed in the RFP. We've reached the October 19th date for council to review the selected proposal and then hopefully approve it so that we can move forward. During this RFP process, we did receive 3 proposals. Of the proposals, Robertson Sherwood Architects, PC, ORW Architecture, and Aquatic Design Group submitted a proposal, and then GM Architecture also submitted a proposal. We developed a design review team consisting of 2 parks representatives, 1 city engineering representative, 1 school district 7 representative, a YMCA representative, and 1 of the representatives of our parks committee. We felt it was really a good idea to get involvement of a lot of the community partners that would be affected by this pool's expansion, so that's why we cast out to the school district and YMCA. School district's obviously right next door to the pool,
part of this project would be expanding parking into their property line, and then YMCA, they are the ones that operate our pool during our season. We all met together on September 21st, and it was determined Robertson Sherwood Associates was the most responsive to the RFP contents, as well as just the highest scoring overall. With that, we had our scoring team with their review sheets. This is the average score, just showing the total scores averaged out from the 6 reviewers. As a part of this process, I delivered sets of the proposals to each individual score, along with the score sheet about a week before the meeting happened, so that everyone had time to review and score individually. We all met up together, reviewed our scores. RSA, Robertson Sherwood Associates, was the resounding winner for the majority of the people in our thing. At the time of the meeting, 5 out of 6 of the reviewers had them as their number 1 ranked. The one that did not have them as their number 1 ranked had them as a close second. So it made for a pretty straightforward selection. This is the proposal team, Robertson Sherwood Associates, and then their listed subcontractors that we have on here. With that, we did do a reference check on them. Carl Sherwood and Scott Skolarski, which I'm going to have to learn how to pronounce his last name. They got really great references from everyone that we contacted. Main themes of the feedback we received was that they are very responsive, easy to work with, great at navigating any sort of difficulties that came up between people with conflicting priorities of what they wanted to do with the pool, as well as they're just really good at communication, which in a large project like this, communication is great. While we were checking the references of RSA as a whole, several of the people that we spoke with also had experience with the other subcontractors listed, and they all too got really good references, which was nice. Here's just a snapshot of some of the projects that this design team has worked on in the past. A part of the RFP's scoring criteria was experience in working in municipal pools in the past, and this is a team that's got a lot of experience in that. As well as one project aspect of this that was important to council from the June 6th meeting was looking into solar alternatives. RSA has worked with the Aquatics Design Group for about 10 years. They've worked on several solar alternative projects for pools, including the OU Student Recreation Center, which actually recently got the LEEDS Platinum rating for their alternative projects and things they included into that. And then for other pools that they installed some variation of solar technology into, you had Echo Hollow Pool, Sheldon Pool, Amazon Pool, Nehalem Pool, and then the Daniel Myers Pool. They're the ones that in Ashland did the basically energy review to decide what to do from natural gas, solar alternatives, or some sort of electrical thing. So they've got a lot of experience when it comes into that deep dive side of incorporating solar alternatives into this pool design. Here's the proposed timeline for this. One thing that really set them out above the other was the C6 section that's in your guys' packet of the proposal. Not only did they provide a really nice graphic for the timeline, but they really detailed out what we're going to be getting and in the thresholds that they want us to hit before moving on, as well as they were, I believe, the only one that called out with those purple stars times for not only community engagement, but council engagement as well as coming to meet with you guys to discuss go over progress and things along those lines. Again, they were really good on the whole receptive and being communicative side of things. With that, this proposal or this resolution right now is looking at the stage 1 aspect of this. That includes the goal setting, site analysis, program development, project assessment, concept development, design refinement, and then an overall report. Essentially, stage 1, they're going to be getting everything that they need to understand what our goals are for this facility in the future, what our current practices are, what our intended future use of it is, so that they can start shaping the narrative that they need to be able to develop into the design phase. They're going to be looking at what type of programs we want to have running out of the pool, what type of things that need to be developed in order to support that, and what our overall infrastructure/resources are to get this pool to where it needs to be developed. At the end of this, we'll come out with several conceptual designs that council should be able to review and hopefully be able to pick one that we can then refine through systematic design to move forward with stage 2. Another aspect of stage one, once we have more of the conceptual design down and we've made some of the decisions, they'll be able to give us that overall soft cost of what this project's looking like it's going to cost us to actually develop. And then once we get to that stage, we'd have all the information we need so that they can then dive into not only giving us a price for what they expect stage two to cost us, but also everything the design and engineers need to move into the more hard cost side of engineering, structural cost, and then just the overall dive into the various building codes and Oregon public health codes relating to pools under Chapter 333. So it's really great proposal that they provided us with the actual timelines into it. Cost implications, stage one is set not to exceed $120,249. As far as resource allocations go, we do have a standing balance in LB 6393 of, a little over $278,000. ARPA funding has been allocated $1.2 million. And then there has been talks of using up to about $5 million from urban renewal to help fund this project as well. And then from a staff level discussion that we had with District 7 staff, they did mention that they would be receptive to possibly adding some sort of cost share agreement into the parking lot side of it because it would be considered mutually beneficial. It's just one of those options we haven't really vetted out with them yet, but it is a potential. With that, we have today's date with the call to action. That's in line with our timeline for the RFP. There's a potential motion up there. And then council always has the alternatives of denying the resolution, and then we'd look back at this pool project as a whole at another date. Questions?
Thank you, Josh. Questions? Rick?
Thank you, Josh. So in their package that they're putting together, do they essentially have a blank check, or do they have some parameters that we want to stay within certain financial guidelines?
So at this stage, we haven't had that discussion of really like if you're talking overall, like, oh, we don't want to spend more than $5 million on this pool. We have not had that discussion with them yet. That's a part of the discussion as far as the goal setting and everything like that as stage one. On their end, it really doesn't do them any favors as designers to design something that will never get built, type of a thing.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Vanessa?
I wanted to follow up from a discussion that the Sustainability and Energy Action Task Force is having in coordination with the Energy Trust of Oregon, their new construction program. There is a potential for a doubling of a consultant to maximize energy savings for this project in its new construction phase. Has there been any consideration of that, of linking those two possibilities together, the design process and this Energy Trust of Oregon consultant grant?
Yes, we were made aware of the Sustainability Task Force's recommendation, I think, yesterday, and I've spoken to Angeli O'Connor at Energy Trust about their program. At this stage, the way we would traditionally move forward with this, well, I don't know about Grants Pass, but the way you'd normally move forward with this in other jurisdictions I've worked at is we would broach that subject up with our design firm once we've selected them. They're very well versed in Energy Trust Oregon projects. The whole packet talks about different experiences they have in working in these alternative fields. And, we'd really kind of bring it up to them. From speaking with Angeli, there is not really a negative for signing up for their program. It's not a program that's going to provide us a large sum of money towards this project. However, the energy comparison side of it, that would be a really good benefit to have in general. And they provide up to, I think it was 60%, up to $40,000 towards that type of engineered or that type of design feature. But so it's something we're looking at, and once we have council guidance on moving forward with RSA, we'll reach out to them, let them be aware of it, and see what their feedback is and their experiences of working with Energy Trust.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Shall we ask the public if they'd like to comment on this? All right, we'll close public comment and turn it over to council. Brian?
Yeah, just to keep things moving, I move to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Robertson Sherwood Architects PC for the new design for Grants Pass Caveman Outdoor Aquatics Facility Stage 1, project number LB6393.
Second from Joel. All right, discussion on the motion? All right, chatty time. Brian, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. All right, feels like we're making progress on some of these things we've been talking about for a long time, huh? All right. Appointments. We have on the dais in front of you a yellow ballot for an appointment to the Housing Advisory Committee. There's one opening on the committee with 2 candidates. They need to be a rental property owner. And in alphabetical order, we have Tom Bradbeer is a sitting member of the committee, is reapplying, and James Love also applying.
I want to clarify that. It's not James Love, it's James Lowe.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah, because I looked, it's James Lowe from School District 7, so just so
James
you know
Lowe.
that. Yes.
Okay. And the committee has recommended reappointing Tom Bradbeer. They say his past performance and involvement is fantastic. He makes the effort to do his homework and goes above and beyond what the committee asks. So if you would all please mark your ballots and send them this way, and then I will let you know. All right, we have 8 in favor of Tom Bradbeer. Would somebody like to make a motion? Brian?
I move to reappoint Tom Bradbeer to the Housing Committee.
Second? DJ? All right, any discussion on that? All right, Brian, how do you vote?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
All right, reappointed 8-0. Next up, this is an opportunity for public comment, but we don't have anyone in the room tonight. We do. We do have one person. Would you like to comment? All right. We also have a reporter who's not going to be commenting. Did we get emails, Karen?
No, that we didn't. Everyone was answered.
Okay. How about we move on then to consent agenda, and we have a question on item E. Joel.
So under item E, which is the resolution amending the Sustainability and Energy Action Task Force membership, there's what they call an ex officio position for the Energy Trust of Oregon, which I assume is a consultant that's participating with the community, with the group, and I applaud that they have a consultant like the Energy Trust. My understanding is that they're voting though, and they may or may not even live within the city limits, and so I was wondering if it, in terms of policy on all our committees, if we have a consultant, I'm not sure it's a good policy to have consultants voting on issues that come before the council, and that perhaps I think it's good that consultants participate, but that they wouldn't have voting.
Valerie?
If that person is ex officio, that means they don't vote, doesn't it? So it's a non-voting member.
Normally,
assuming-
ex officios are there just because they hold a
That's usually what
specific.
we are, like when we sit in a meeting, we are ex officio members of the meeting, but we don't actually vote on anything. So we're just there for info back and forth.
So just as long as that's clear to everyone, including the Energy Trust, I'm okay with that. I just wanted to make sure that's clear from a policy.
So, is that everybody's understanding, is that ex officio is not voting? All right. Did you have something, Brad?
Well, I was just going to say that that has not been the practice for HAC to date. HAC, Housing Advisory Committee, has, I think, 5, and that maybe is incorrect, but I just wanted to point out that to date, that has not been the case. The ex officios on that committee have voted.
Okay.
So
well,
if we need to change that, we'll look at that. But
I'm having a meeting with the committee chairs on Friday, so Thursday, tomorrow. How about that? What timing? I'm going to plan my dinner tonight. That's how far ahead I'm thinking, everybody. So I'm taking it one minute at a time here.
Time flies.
But I will talk to the committee chairs about that and get clear on our practice tomorrow. Any other questions about that? Are you good, Joel?
Yeah, as long as they're not voting, I'm good.
Okay. With that said, Joel, the council president, will read the consent agenda, which includes items of such routine nature without controversy that they may be approved with a single action.
So the consent agenda for tonight, item A, resolution authorizing the city manager to submit an engine program application and enter into an agreement with the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office for a Type 3 Wildland Urban Interface Engine and Tactical Water Tender. B, resolution authorizing the city manager to submit a grant application and upon award enter into an agreement for the Oregon State Parks Land and Water Conservation Fund grant for playground equipment for Reinhardt Volunteer Park. Item C, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the Schroeder Lane storm drain. Item D, resolution amending the comprehensive fee schedule to include fees for the installation and maintenance of small wireless facilities. Item E, resolution amending the Sustainability and Energy Action Task Force membership as discussed and amended by our previous discussion. Item F, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement for wireless services with FirstNet AT&T Mobility. G, resolution providing financial assistance to the Grants Pass Sobering Center. H, motion approving the minutes of the City Council meeting of September 21st, the City Council special meeting of October 3rd, 2022, the minutes of the Sustainability and Energy Action Task Force meeting of August 10th, the motion acknowledging the minutes of the Tourism Advisory Committee meeting of August 2nd, and the motion acknowledging the minutes of the Collaborative Economic Development Committee meeting of August 25th, 2022. And with that, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Seconded by Valerie. And Joel, you made the motion to approve. How do you vote?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes?
Val?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
All right. Consent agenda passes once again. And mayor and council comments. I was just have one item here. As luck would have it, we canceled every other workshop through the end of the year, but we need to have an executive session to discuss some real estate property issues that we discussed also this past Monday. So I was going to see, I would like Aaron to be able to attend a League of Oregon Cities meeting on housing next Monday. Are you available either late Friday afternoon, like 4 or 5 this week, or Wednesday at 4 or 5 next week? Okay. Let's say Wednesday at 4 would be my preference.
That works for me.
All right. No major objections? Okay, let's plan to do that Wednesday. It's just, here, just that one item, executive session, Wednesday at 4. And Thank you for your flexibility on that. I will turn it over to you for any council items you want to bring up tonight. Vanessa?
Not sure if this is the right method to bring this up, but I wanted the council to have a discussion on foregoing physical packets in the event the pages exceed 400 or 500, and that if you want a physical packet, you can opt for one, but if it's 400 or 500 pages in excess, it'll automatically be digital. I think that that would save staff time and resources, because this packet is pretty heavy to lug around.
DJ?
I can support that. Also, since we had an abstention, we have a hefty amount that's going back into the packet, so we can vote on it a second time. I kind of add that into the whole program, and I think it's superfluous to print this again over a, second reading. Does that make sense? So I can back that up. Yep.
So you're saying just hang on to this packet when that second reading comes around for the, okay. Did you have something different, Rick, or?
No, I'm just old school. I like the paper, but if it's already been produced once, no, we don't need to redo it.
Okay. So some people maybe would pass up on the whole packet, and some people might want the packet. Okay. So we'll have to have Karen have a discussion about us maybe when the need arises. Okay. Sometimes maybe we could just have that one item. I know we had one. I don't remember what the topic was. It was a crazy huge amount of paper on one topic, and usually that's kind of the way it is that one land use issue will have the meat of the packet, and then there's a bunch of other items. So maybe people would be willing to do a hybrid format too, but I'm not sure it helps staff if we all do our own thing. So. Good topic. We can talk about some more. Anything else? Nope. Jason, I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you give us an update on the water situation?
Yeah, we can. You guys might have noticed that there was a slight incident with the water system this week. We I've been doing this now for 28 years, and it really truly was the biggest water main break I've ever seen. It caused a pressure drop over a very, very large extent of the city. That pressure drop corresponds to a potential for harmful bacteria to enter the system, because as the pressure drops inside the pipe, anything that's outside the pipe could get sucked in, or we could have a backflow event from somebody's house. Under coordination with the State of Oregon Drinking Water Program, they did recommend that we do a very extensive boil notice. So the good news is, when the samples all came back after the required flushing and testing, what it proved is that no bacteria entered the system, and we were able to lift that boil notice very, very quickly. The pipe that broke has not been completely fixed, but they were up there working on it again today, and it will be hopefully restored soon. I think there's still the potential for one property that's still out, but they were able to reconnect them to a different set of lines. We are in the process of doing an internal debrief of everything that went on, both from a in the field standpoint, but also what, the actions that we took here and the notifications and all of that. And we'll be generating a very detailed memo for council on what we did, what we will do next time, and the things that we saw that we could do better, but also the things that we saw that we did incredibly well, that the things that staff we fielded, I want to say it was 1,200 phone calls in an afternoon, through all the various departments. By and large, the majority of the people that we talked to, once we talked to them, they were supportive. It was a very positive thing, but of course, but everybody's worried. But it was a very tough situation.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? All right. Yeah, I thought it was good that it was handled quickly and got everything back on track. I did have a question somebody asked about the other side of the river potentially being affected. Can
Yeah.
you explain how the system works a little bit?
Yeah, I wish I could show you the picture on my phone. So the low-level reservoirs, all three of them dropped dramatically. So we actually saw the pressure drop at New Hope Pump Station, which is all the way out at the intersection of 238 and New Hope Road. We saw pressure drops at Williams Crossing. So what that tells us is that because we were losing such a volume of water, we lost about 1.6 million gallons during that break, which is a significant amount of water. And so the pressure went down across the entire city. Now, on south of the river, did it get as low to where we could allow stuff in? Maybe not, but again, it was very precautionary. We are having discussions, this is part of what will be in the debrief and why we want to provide you with a detailed memo. I think we could have maybe gone against what the state required, not required, but asked us to do, and shrunk that up a little bit, but because we didn't know, we didn't have good data, we thought we were much better to err on the side of caution. It would have been really bad had we not put the boil notice over there, and turns out that that's where the bacteria was found. So we really just wanted to err on the side of caution.
Terrific. I know I got quite a few questions about notifications. And so, you know, one thing that always comes to mind for me when you have a situation like this is it basically works as a test run. Should we ever have something that's a more significant disaster, people need to make sure that their phone numbers and email addresses are up to date in the emergency alert system so that they will get the contact when something really bad happens. So anyway, good that we got
We
that
appreciate
result.
everybody's understanding. We recognize it was a burden on a lot of people. It really was an ordeal for all of the staff as well.
It's also good to keep a couple gallons of water in the house, huh? You know, those
Yes, it
things that
is.
you always hear people say come to life when something like this happens. DJ?
Yeah, if I could just briefly say, I'm looking at this as testament to the strength of your department, Jason, and thank you for responding accordingly.
All right, other comments from staff? Nope. All right, no exec session tonight, so who's going to do the honors? Valerie.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
All right, seconded by Joel. All in favor of adjourning this evening, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned until Wednesday at 4 p.m. See you next week.
Oh, you're, well, what are we